Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. We are going to begin in 1 minute just to allow a couple more folks to trickle in. And let's do it. Um, Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me for our fourth Workforce Connect webinar, where we learn from college leaders about innovative approaches to solving today's issues. Today, we will learn from Dr. Janet Pilcher and Dr. Julie Kunselman and how they coach college teams in managing a talent pipeline in times of extraordinary change. Before we jump into it, I'd like to introduce myself and our guest. I am Marty Lessman, the founder and chief experience officer of Workforce Connect, an out-of-the-box workforce partnership management platform designed for college teams to replace spreadsheets and overpowered CRMs to make workforce partnership management easy. Through this journey, I've had the opportunity to partner with numerous teams supporting higher education. The Studer Education Higher Ed team, led by our president, Studer President, Dr. Janet Pilcher, and leader coach, Dr. Julie Kunselman, are one such team. These two have connected me with many of their college partners, seeking better systems to manage and scale employer partnerships in this new era of career-centric education. In conversations with Janet and Julie, I have learned some of the transformational leadership practices that they coach at Studer Education, and it's an honor to have them both join us today. Julie, Janet, welcome to you both. Before talking about managing a talent pipeline in today's extraordinary times of change, I would love to learn about who you are and more about Studer Education. Janet, can you kick us off?
Yeah, thank you, Marty. Thanks for the opportunity, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone who's joining us today. Thank you for your time. I'm Janet Pilcher. As Marty said, I lead Studer Education, and I've had an opportunity to spend quite a bit of time in my life in higher ed. I spent 20 years at a higher education institution, the majority of those being in leadership positions, one of those as a dean of a college, and I have great passion and love for higher education and always will. And the work that we've been able to do at Studer Education, where we intersect and blend strategy, culture, and leadership to help organizations continuously improve and be the best that they can, building good workplace environments as well as building good strategy to build off of the environment to achieve results. That's the work that we do each and every day, working with some extraordinary partners, some extraordinary presidents and chancellors and executive leaders and leaders across the country. We're just so happy to be here today to share some of that work with you. Julie?
Thanks, Janet. My name is Julie Kunselman. I lead research and I'm a coach of our higher ed partners. I too spent about 20 years in higher ed, both at the community college level in Kentucky and also at a four-year institution in Florida. So just excited to be with you all and excited to engage with you in the Q&A.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for joining us. Let's jump into it, and let's start by talking about some higher education challenges, some of which we can control, some of which we cannot control. But it seems like, especially in today's climate, there's quite a few headwinds that are presented. So, can you talk through some of these, and what are those that we can control?
Yeah, thank you. You know, it's first of all, I'd like to say, as we're talking about leadership today, as I work alongside leaders each and every day, I'm always humbled by how difficult leadership is. And as we're facing the challenges of higher education, they continuously change. But one of the conversations that we have with our executive leaders is looking at what those challenges are and looking at what we can control. So even some of those times when we think we can't control the external factors, we still ask ourselves, what part of that can we control? We know we're dealing with budget deficits and reduced funding, but how can we work with our people in very specific ways to build efficiencies within our organization and do things differently? How do we understand the changing landscape? How do we build leadership capacity and capability? How do we make sure that not only leaders have the skills to lead, but that people across our organizations have the opportunity to share their ideas, to share their insights, and help us move the institution forward? And we'll talk a lot about, how do we work with our talent? Looking at talent pipeline, we're going to specifically look more inward at how do we work with the people that we have and how do we manage to that in times of extraordinary change. We know we have declining student enrollment, but how do we manage to that? How do we build from that? How do we manage our organizations and right size our organizations as the competition increases? And then I think most importantly, what I've learned in the last year, Marty and others, is every decision that we make is really driven by student experience. What are we trying to do? We're trying to give students the best experience that we possibly can. And we're constantly asking ourselves, when we make these decisions, are we indeed achieving that outcome? Those are all things that as we're having conversations, we can control.
And I love that you have the student experience listed and especially noted as something under our control. I see here you built out a whole continuum of student experiences. So talk to us about these.
Yeah, this is like my scratch pad here, Marty, of looking at research and just putting together a wheel of, and there are more than this, you all, in terms of rethinking how we serve students. But when I've been reading the research on the changing landscape, what we know are students are coming to college because they want a good job. And that's something that sometimes we have been okay with that. Other times we have to change the culture for our people to understand that that is driving the need for students. They need it to be affordable. We don't have control sometimes of tuition, but the way that we structure programs, maybe we can structure those in a way that's more affordable for students. And we want to make sure that the college preparedness really touches my heart, you all. Because what the research is beginning to show is that when students show up on our doorstep at our institutions, that they don't have the confidence that they need to be successful. So that makes our jobs a lot different than what we may have traditionally sensed our jobs to be, because we want them to be successful. And we want to do that with respect, the sense of belonging, know that they have value, and make sure that they're cared for and provide for their well-being. Those are the student experiences are well beyond what we do in the classroom with the academics. It's that holistic experience that really challenges us to be better than what we've been in the past and to strive for doing things differently.
And as we think about that student experience and creating more career-centric education, career-focused education, I know our college partners with us today have heard we just need more employment skills. We need more soft skills. We need more professional skills, 21st century skills, whatever you want to call them. And I think that certainly holds true for our students, but perhaps even true for our own employment base inside of colleges. Would you agree?
I do. And I've got a little, quote up there that's like, to teach, or statement, to teach relational skills, we too must master and model them. That's the big challenge when we're thinking about talent and talent pipeline and how we prepare our own people. What we've been in conversations with people in our institutions, our leaders, we can't assume that the people who work in our institutions also have these skills so that they're able to transfer those skills to our students. So how do we make sure that we're providing that type of development to the people who work with us each and every day? These two things, I think, are really from the research of the power of mattering. When you look at what our employers want, 70% surveyed, the executives say that relational skills are more important than technical skills. And 78% of the top employing occupations now classify uniquely human skills as critical. That is something that I think we pay attention to, and we can't just assume that that's going to happen. We've got to build our talent pipeline. We've got to build our people and develop our people to help provide what we need to students so that they can be employable in the most productive way.
So what I think I'm hearing you say is a couple things. One, to maximize the value that we bring to our students, we need to be professionals in our own right because our students learn from our own actions.
Absolutely.
And we then need to also cultivate those skills within our own organizations to make sure that our own people are successful. And perhaps that is what you're insinuating as part of the talent pipeline is building that from within.
Yes.
So
And
I'm gonna
and
have
Marty,
you put
and
this.
Marty,
Go
just
ahead.
there too. And if when we're faculty teaching in classrooms, if we're going to integrate those relational skills in our coursework, we have to know how to do that well. Right. And that's the other wraparound piece there. So just that's the interconnection of how we develop ourselves and the talents and the type of skills that we need are a direct connection to how we develop our students.
I love that. We're gonna keep pushing here. I need to inform everyone as you're listening in, please ask questions in the chat. We will be monitoring the chat throughout the conversation, and towards the end, we'll be opening up the floor to answer some of those questions. So please put those questions in the chat. All right, Janet and Julie, back to you here. So we have um, an opportunity to emulate professionalism, but we can't just expect our employees to show up professionals first day. It is a continued growth cycle. I think that's what I'm hearing you say.
Yes.
So talk to me then, if we think about our employees, where do they fall on the continuum?
Yeah, and if you'll flip back to that slide, that's the advanced organizer of what Julie and I will talk about. We're going to provide some very specific examples around these bulleted points and show how some of the work that we do in the tactical pieces and the strategic work that we do and what our partners do really help us achieve these outcomes of leading to change. And so what the first area, as you flip to the next slide, is we want to continuously improve ourselves. And then some of the questions that we get asked is, what we can't let people hold us back either. And I won't spend too much time on this curve, but I just want to call our attention to this visual as we think about the next sections of the conversation here. This is from the research, decades of research. For the most part, about 30% of our individuals are high performers. They show up to work every day. We count on them. We can't imagine them not being part of our organization. About 60% are in that solid performing category, some at the high end of the solid. So they're coming to work, but they need a little coaching. Some of the lower solid performers, they come to work, they show up, they do a good job, but they need a little bit more coaching and a little bit more guidance from our leaders. And then we have our low performers who show up to work and sometimes can be toxic in the workplace culture. And so our goal is to move this curve, make it narrow, move it right and tight, so that we're basically moving people up that performance curve. The good news in this, and this is what I really want you to take with you here. The good news is the majority, about 90% of the people in our organization want to do a good job. There are fewer people who come to work with maybe that toxic behavior. We have to address that behavior. But the first thing we can do is really recognize and build the culture around our 90%. And so we're really going to focus on how we do that. And as we look at the way that we do that, I love this visual as well, because when we think about our performance curve, what we're trying to do is help our new people move from being unconsciously unskilled. In other words, they come in, they're excited, but then when they experience their first challenge, they go, uh-oh, this is more difficult than I thought. And then they're having to kind of manage through to get to that other side. And it's at that point, that critical learning point, that our coaching, the leadership coaching, the way we nurture our people, the way we guide our people becomes most critical so that they can continue to move to that eventually unconsciously unskilled, which are usually our high performers who have done something over and over again, and they show up and they can just do it. It's a habit of practice for what they do. What's really important here is even positive change, there can be resistance. So even when people are at that high performing level and we implement a change and we're still building our talent, the high performers may slip into unconsciously unskilled until they can regain that confidence in what they do. They're comfortable. And so what we're trying to do is basically help ourselves as leaders be okay with the discomfort. And it's that coaching aspect of what we do as leaders with our talent and with our people and how we interact with them that help them manage through that. That's our job in building that talent pipeline as leaders, is to coach our people through those critical learning points to to build habits of practice in the way we show up and how we perform each and every day. Here's what's really important. From the work of research on mattering, the power of mattering, I love this, you all. 93% of people who felt valued were motivated to do their work, and 88% were engaged. And over the decades, we know that studies have shown us this. Here's what we also know about people being valued. When we look at loneliness, 58% of people at work feel lonely. But loneliness is not the outcome of being alone. It's an outcome of feeling you don't matter. An outcome of feeling you don't matter. So when we work with organizations, we work off of this research because the strategies that Julie's going to talk about are going to be those ways that we help people feel that they matter as we coach them through the process of building their skills, their confidence to continuously engage in the work each and every day so that we can be the best that we can be at the institution, because we're helping them be the best that they can be. Those two pieces of research connect to what I have kind of, Marty, I think you had, you and I had talked about, we talk about work-life balance, right? But
All
then,
the time.
yeah. So, I've moved away from that term because it's difficult to understand how we build balance. And I've moved away more into the conversations around work-life integration, really focusing in on two things of how people matter. They feel valued by others. And think about us. We want to show up every day. We want to know this about ourselves. We want to feel valued by others, but we also want to see how what we do in education provides value to others. And as leaders, if we can build culture and implement tactics and strategies that help people feel those two things, we're going to change the culture of our organization. That's what we as an organization really try to do in blending strategy and culture together and developing our leaders to harvest those components of building that culture. So that's just setting the context for then what do we do? Like, how do we do it? So let's look at some of those strategies that we do with our institutions. One of the things that Julie, as we talk about this, one of the things that we do in most every piece of the work is we talk about deeply connecting people to the work. So it's the people who are closest to the work, who are engaging with us in this improvement process. And we're either using numeric information data, or we're using narrative or numeric information, where they're gathering that information, we're talking about, looking at it, what it means, and then we're acting on it. And we're continuing to gather that information from people so that we're acting to continuously improve what we're doing each and every day. Not because it's what we want to do, but it's because what they need from us, they need for us to do. So keep that in mind as we look at some strategies that we'll talk about that you can just take with you or that you can think through.
So before we get into those strategies, I just want to make sure that I'm hearing some of what you're saying correctly. What we bring as a culture at our institutions impacts our students. And that impact on students extends beyond just our faculty, who typically have the most direct touch points with students, but really it's the culture set organization-wide. And when folks feel valued at the organization and not lonely and have connected their life with their work and feel valued throughout, that brings value to the organizational culture, which then drives the student experience upward and also teaches our students how to engage in those same aspects of life.
That's right, Marty. I mean, that's such a great summary, because we're modeling what we talked about, if we're modeling that and we're taking that into our classrooms, and we're also teaching our students, how to do the same thing. And that's the, so just showing up and wanting to do that is not good enough. Like, we have to do something in order to make those things happen.
Got it. All right. So how do I know where my culture sits today and where and how I can start the improvement cycle? Julie, I see you smiling, so maybe
Yeah.
this is where you start to take over a little bit.
Yeah, Marty, I think administering the survey to invite employee feedback coupled with the rollout process is just a great example of the feedback loop that Janet just discussed. So employee responses on the survey, both the response rate and the frequency distribution of responses, when we talk about scaled items, they're important because they set the stage for the conversation. And again, that's what Janet was just talking about with the feedback loop. And this is what we call the rollout conversation. So the purpose of the rollout conversation is really to engage leaders in the results rollout process. It gives their teams an opportunity to provide additional input on their survey feedback. And some leaders at the beginning of our journey will ask, what if they don't talk to me, right? And certainly that's a valid fear. And I think probably connected really with that culture of engagement that you were just describing, Marty, to connect the dots for us. So prior to the results rollout process, we work with leaders at every single level to help them better understand the purpose for the rollout, these steps that you see here in the preparation, and really stress with them on the focus of listening and learning. They have to ask good questions that are solution-focused questions that really help them better understand that, oftentimes the survey results, we'll see them and they're like, well, that's not true, right? Well, it may not be our truth as leaders, but it certainly that represents the employee's truth, right? And so what you see on this slide is the steps provide a general process for the results rollout to gain input. And then on the right side, the green and yellow boxes on the top provide example questions that some leaders have used that we've worked with their teams, right? And so to roll out their results. For example, if one of the highest items, highest means on the survey was for the item, I understand how my work impacts the success of my institution in achieving its goals, then the leader may ask that question in the green box, right? What helps you know and understand the impact you are making? Are there certain measures? And as your leader, what can I do to better help you understand that or support you with how what you do impacts the institution? So just those questions that we provide, not that we provide, that the leaders are engaged in moving to, that are solutions focused, really help them reduce that fear of what if they don't talk to me, right? Because they're asking really great questions and building that listening loop for their employees.
And I personally like a few items here on this slide. There's a bit, but one, the fact that we're using a survey to gather that baseline information, like where do we
Mhm.
actually sit, and you're surveying all levels of the institution. Step 6 actually strikes me in a positive way of thanking your team members for actually participating. Like that's his first step to building that culture that you actually want.
Yeah.
I like that you have opportunities for folks to talk about successes and to share how they know. Like that, we often start with a deficit mindset, but
Mhm.
leveraging the positive also improves culture as well.
Yeah, you got it. And in like that second item in the yellow, that what's cool about this is, and I stress this with the teams, right? They're giving us the answer to the test, really, right? Because it's what does this look like when I do this well? What's
Yeah.
a leader doing when they do this well? They're telling us exactly what that means. So we don't have to make it up, right? And that's really that's really the gold the goal that comes out of these survey rollout processes.
So you have baseline data, and then I see something called a scorecard. So what do you do with that data, and how do we drive culture improvements based off of that baseline data?
Yeah, the institutional scorecard includes sustainability metrics for the institution. It's the metrics that are most important to keep the doors of the institution open, right? And as institutions operationalize their strategic plan, we oftentimes build the sustainability scorecard with them. And often part of that strategic plan is that employee success or our people or employee excellence pillar, right? That overarching priority. And so this is where the culture matters in terms of institutional sustainability, right? What sustains an institution is its alignment of goals, behaviors, and processes, and that culture of engagement and execution. So what you see on this slide is not only 5-year goals for employee success that are aligned with that employee engagement and experience survey, but also their execution with fidelity in the rollout process. So in this first, what we're looking at right now is that increased participation between years 1 and year 2, almost actually this is the sorry
There
that
you go. Sorry about
participation,
that.
thanks, no, that's okay. Increased participation between year 1 and year 2, we're almost at 106% of the target, right? So what leaders are doing has made a difference. And then if you click again, Marty, then we're looking at their employees are more likely now to recommend the institution as a good place to work. And we're using that employee net promoter score that really shows how we've moved from having more detractor ratings, right? Those 0 to 6 ratings in 2024 to now we have more promoter rank ratings, those 9 and 10 ratings on the scale in 2025. And then in the last part of this slide, we've really seen that all 5 of the communication items on the survey have increased, right? And just the importance, again, of the connection. If we execute the results rollout process, the feedback loops well, then we see a difference year over year in the results.
And Julie, you know, what's so important about what you're saying too, it's we're looking at numbers and we're using numbers to assess how well we're doing. But it's really not about the numbers as we're talking in the feedback loop. It's about the conversations that we're having with our teams about the numbers. What's working? Where can we improve? How can we engage in a meaningful conversation, gain your input, and move that to action? That's the value of building that culture, and we're developing our people to help connect them to their work so that we know how we can continuously improve.
You got it. And Janet, that's exactly right, right? The real success of the results rollout and action planning, it's that opportunity to build a culture of trust with our colleagues. So it always pains me to say the numbers just get us to the conversation. The conversation's the most important thing, but it's absolutely true, right? Especially when we see that consistency of practice. And I love this quote because it talks about that, right? The college environment seems different this year. I think we're moving in the right direction. I look forward to where we're headed. And it's just what you're talking about, Janet, of saying we've got to learn from our employees, the folks closest to the work, to really help us get there.
Yeah.
So, all right. I'm a firm believer in surveys. I was a former math teacher. I love data. I love to track progress. But you all do some of the hard work and coach the hard work of continuous improvement between survey cycles, right? So we just don't hope and pray that what we're doing is going to work, I would assume. So how do we capture feedback? How do you, as Studer Education, coach people on how to capture feedback in real time on if what we're doing is actually working to improve culture?
Yeah, that's so as we're continuing to act. So we've moved the conversation to action. We're going to work on these one or two things. We want to know how we're doing, and we want to connect with people one-on-one. If we're making a change in our organization, we've implemented something new, rather than hope for the best, Marty, we want to know how it's going. And sometimes we also want to know our people. And so we have an approach called rounding that really helps us do that. It's one of our most powerful strategies that we see getting great outcomes. And the value of rounding, people know, they know people, they know their name. It's what matters. We're checking on people, we're listening, we're processing, we're probing, we're recording, we're acting, we're improving. And we're engaging in writing and speaking, knowing that words matter. And that's really what rounding allows us to do. And so it's a one-on-one conversation, making a personal connection with the person that we're engaging with, asking when we implemented X, let's say on the survey rollout process in our action plan, what's working well with that? What challenges are you facing as we're doing that? Who's been especially helpful as we've done that, or helpful to you? What did they do? And how can I be helpful to you as your leader? How can I be helpful to you so we continue that momentum? And then we make sure that we gather that information and we follow up, and we continuously follow up and continue to change and make sure that we're taking that information and building those improvements and communicating. Julie, what you said with the communication, this is really one way that helps us build the increase in communication, because it's not one and done. It's constantly gathering that feedback so that we're showing people how we're continuously improving because of what they tell us is important to them. So Julie, talk a little bit about, just some of the outcomes of the rounding pieces that you've witnessed as you've worked with institutions.
You're on mute, Julie.
Happens every time. Thanks. Marty, if you don't mind going to the next slide. So as Janet mentioned, rounding's really about building relationships, right? And so these examples that you're going to see here are from a partner in South Carolina. And on the right side, when we talk about leader rounding on employees, these are the results that from the employee engagement and experience survey that show an increase in those metrics that matter, related to like employee belonging and communication and willingness to recommend the institution. And it's that feedback loop again, and the rounding feedback loop, what Marty described in between. We just don't have hope as our strategy. It's the work that we're doing in between consistently. And Janet talked about earlier about modeling behavior. So it's executing with fidelity a consistent leadership practice of engaging employees, and rounding is one way that happens with our teams and leader rounding on employees. On the left side, you see what we call support service rounding, and this shows results and continued improvement for an athletics department, as the athletic department and assistant ADs really round on not only academics, faculty and deans, provost, but also on student service leaders, and also on finance and administration, right, as well. Because what we've learned from our partners in athletics is that with the changes in the NCAA, and the NIL, the portal, you know, it's really challenged their focus on not only recruitment and retention, but it's also become so important for them to engage with others across the institution to help support that student success, especially in recruitment and retention. And what support service rounding helps us do then is connect with leaders, faculty, staff outside our division, asking those same questions. What's working, you know, what's not working and why? What actions can we take in athletics to help you have a better experience in working with us and help our students really have a better experience in terms of recruiting and retaining them.
So if rounding might be a new topic here for some folks, what I'm hearing a rounding conversation to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, is a structured conversation where leaders, I assume, have a set of questions that they try to engage with everyone across the organization, not just a select few, to drive both their own awareness of really what's going on inside of the organization and inside of their individual employees' heads, for that matter, but also to drive back that value piece that we started the conversation on. If my leaders want to engage with me and want to get the feedback from me and take action on that feedback, I feel more valued in what I do at work. And when I feel valued, that becomes part of my life. And I want to bring greatness to the organization. Is that what we're trying to achieve with rounding?
Yeah, I think I mean, and that's when you look at how we started, Marty, thank you for taking us back to that. Really, the two tactics, the survey rollout connected to the rounding process, it is really about how you help people understand they have value, how they matter, because what they do every day does matter. And what they provide us in terms of input and how we continuously improve matters. And they add value, and then we can show them how they add value as we kind of move to that recognition piece as well. So we're looking at employee engagement or survey rollout process and feedback loop and conversations, one-on-one conversations, as you talked about, Marty, with the rounding conversation, still working in that feedback loop, doing something with the data and acting on it and continuously improving. And then the third tactic that we'll talk about is then, which we're ending with, because I think it's just so important. And it's the value of recognition and appreciation. Every day we see bright spots occurring in our organizations all the time. And we ask ourselves, how many times do we pay attention to those bright spots? And we might internalize them and see them and know them, but how do we bring them to life? And so there are very specific things we can do. One, there are two things what we'll talk about is connect to purpose and thank you notes. And one thing we can always do is connect to purpose. And that is really doing something where we start a meeting off or we start anything that we do off with connecting to purpose. Julie, you want to talk about an example that you have with a partner and the way they connected to purpose?
Yeah, this is a higher ed institution in Georgia, and we've incorporated the Connect to Purpose really as an opportunity to build alignment. If you click on that next slide, yeah, thanks. It's really about alignment to help those teams and individuals know how what they do matters. And Janet talked about this earlier, right? And so this is a dean on chart paper and his associate deans really showing their connection to the strategic plan in their work of people, purpose, and action. And it's really helping them reinforce how what they do matters in the institution.
That's good.
So,
And as we,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, as we close today, you know, I mean, the power of a thank you note. a personal connection, being specific about what we're recognizing, and creating a place where notes and recognitions are shared. There's nothing more powerful than a thank you note. So close us out, Julie, here with just a couple of ways that we see people doing that.
Yeah, on that next slide, we're really talking about leaders just changing the way they lead in some ways, right? And so part of this work really means we've got to pour back into ourselves as a leadership team. And so this is just one example where we had thank you notes with a vice president and their teams, and really said, write a sentence for us, right? To help us know what's making a difference for you right now. And so these are some of the examples of what people said to their colleagues on that leadership team, because it's, again, important to know when people hear how their work is positively affecting others, they're more likely to really focus on those needs and objectives of the team. And then the next example, we not only had them share for each other, but we asked them to provide a sentence for their president or for their chancellor. And what I love about this is that they've really shared why they stay, right? So we hear of stay interviews and other things, but it's really in this thank you that really helps us understand why these leaders are staying. And I love one of the ones that I just heard in this. It's not by accident that this is a great place to work. And I think that just reinforces that alignment of how what we do and executing with fidelity really makes a difference and can make a difference for employee experience as well as culture, all leading to that employee success or student success.
Got it. All right. Janet, take us home. This is your quote.
Yeah, and as we think about going back to the performance curve for a few minutes, what we've really been focused on is how we develop our talent. I mean, when we look at the talent in the pipeline, how we create a culture for hiring the people who we want to hire to come into the organization that we create, what we have as expectations. And then when we look at the talent that we have within and we're developing them, we're focusing on the 90%. There's an old other segment of what we can talk about with the 10%, but today we're focusing on the 90% because those 90% deserve for us to make those deep connections. They deserve to feel valued, and they deserve to know how they show value to others. That's why we show up every day and we do what we do. So when we think about it, it's not work or life. That's what we're hoping for. When we think about going to work, it's not making a choice of work or life. Hopefully what we're doing as leaders is it's how work adds value in our life. And if we can create environments where that occurs, then we, I think, are becoming the leaders that we want to be. And for our students, we hope that we're transferring that and modeling that, where it's not school or life, it's how school adds value in a student's life. That's what we've been working with. So respectful of the people who do the work with us each and every day as our partners. They do fabulous work, and so appreciative for the leadership that they provide to their institutions. And I thank you all for connecting with us today. Love to learn from you at some point and sometime as well. So thank you for your time, and be glad to answer any questions that you have. Thank you, Marty, for this opportunity as well.
Of course. And this is a good reminder to put some questions in the chat for you all. And I'm going to try to summarize some of what I think I learned here as folks do that, and then invite my colleague Sam to ask you all some of the questions that she sees coming into the chat. What I think I heard this conversation allude to is the power of the culture is the power of the pipeline, and that a strong pipeline is like a magnet. And when create a strong, professional, student-centric, employee-centric, and value-centric culture, not only will we retain our own employees because they feel valued, but that starts to pull in other folks who want to be part of our organization and institution, and likely both through the lens of employees, but also students. Like our students will want to start to become part of that because of the value that our employees feel and are portraying back to our students. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, it's well said, Marty. That's the, before we can, as we recruit people into our organization, we want to recruit, we want people to want to come to our organization, and we want to create environments. As leaders, we want to be the leader of creating those type of environments where that occurs. And we start with where we are. We start with ourselves, and we start with where we are, and we build from that, one step at a time, one stair step at a time. The tools and tactics that we talked about today, they seem very common sense and they're not difficult, but they're not always applied. And so what we just encourage people to do is take some of these simple, less complicated approaches and just do that work and watch their culture change, and watch their people really see the value that they add. There's nothing more satisfying to a leader than seeing that change occur.
So I'm going to invite Sam here to ask our first question, which I think alludes to the folks that don't necessarily work with students. I started my career as a high school math teacher. I had direct impact on students. And then I transitioned into leadership roles and got further and further away from students. And so I think Sam has a question on how do we, knowing that we're an educational institution, still empower and make our employees who don't have those direct touch points with students still feel like they are impacting student lives, something like that. Sam, what do you have for us?
Yeah, the question is, how do we make the people who don't work directly with students feel valued to themselves and to students?
Yeah, Julie, you want to start with that?
Sure. Thanks. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Janet. I heard a president one time say, when we work with our jobs as support service people, right? HR or IT or facilities, finance. Our jobs, if we don't work directly with students, are to pay ridiculous attention to our colleagues who do work with students directly, right? And what our work with folks has really reinforced that idea by really helping people see from that strategic level. If we just talk about student recruitment or access, right, is how that student success metric enrollment really aligns to other areas. Excuse me, sorry. And so what I mean by that is if we see access or increased enrollment as one of our strategic goals, then what's the focus for IT in that? It's making sure we have the infrastructure that will support student growth. What is it for facilities? Well, it's making sure that our classrooms and our buildings and our facility infrastructure, capital infrastructure is ready to go. What is it for HR? Well, I just had a conversation with someone in Wisconsin the other day, and part of it is we don't have any adjuncts to increase. We have students waiting, but we don't have adjuncts. And so it's what's HR's function in really setting the stage for that pool of adjuncts, right? How do we build that out and help people understand and see their connection, whether they're working directly with students or not working directly with students? It's, when Janet and I were in higher ed a couple decades ago, we were very much turf associated. I won't throw Janet under the, let me make an I statement. I was. And so I was focused on us, right? And that's not higher ed today. It's really about how we fit in the larger scheme of what it means to support a student. And so that's just really been it's been integral really in our work to show these folks who don't work directly with students how what they do matters.
Yeah, and I think Julie connected with that. We showed them, and then the recognition, the thank you notes. So I mean, just recognizing when you see it, recognize it. That's kind of the when you see it and write a note and show them. So it goes back to people. Everyone wants to add value. People are working at institutions because they want to add value to students. If they can't see it, we can see it for them sometimes. Recognize that and show them how they're adding value and write that in words on a thank you note so that they can internalize that. It's powerful.
All right, next question. For all of our attendees today who are watching and anyone who watches the recording later, how do they get started? Where do they start? There's a lot of great information here, a lot of great resources, but I can imagine someone's like a little overwhelmed. Where do I start?
Yeah, one of the I think you start with one or two things, right? I think we go back to where we start is really assessing where your highest need is. But when we're looking at it's got to start at the leader level, I think, for one. I mean, I think we basically as leaders are making the commitment to doing one or two things. I think any of the three things that we talked about, rounding with our step, just taking what we talked about today. If you did two things, the survey I would encourage to do, but it takes a little bit more effort because you got to implement and it's a longer period of time. But if you walked out of here today with two things, pick a couple of people, round with them, and then as part of that rounding question, there's one that says who was especially helpful or who would you like to recognize. Take that and follow that through and recognize them, openly recognize them. So if you could walk out and start somewhere, take 1 week, say I'm going to do round with two people and I'm going to write two thank you notes connected to those rounds and just see what that feels like to you, and then really understand what that feels like to the other people. And it's contagious. One thing we find with one-on-one conversations is I usually tell leaders, if you start doing that, don't stop, because people like it so much. They really don't like you when you stop doing it. So just make sure you make that commitment. But how do we make first of all, commit to, we're going to really focus our attention on helping people understand they matter. And then how can we do those one or two things in 1 week, and then process that and figure out how we take those steps.
Yeah, Janet, thanks for saying don't stop, because that's what I was going to add to yours, right? If we start this, it's that consistency of moving, continuing to do it, because as soon as we stop, then it's like, oh, well, this is just one more thing, right? So we've really got to build that consistency of practice. I think more globally too, Sam, if we think about how does someone start with us, we just start with a conversation. It's really that feedback loop in process, right? We have a conversation, we learn, right, about pain points, where you want to be, all of those things. So it's really just learning and helping to really understand where that leader is or that institution is, and then us being able to have a conversation about what makes the most sense and does that feel right? So we wouldn't start it in one institution, the same place necessarily we start in another. It's really based on those conversations and that assessment, that feedback loop.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sam, for the questions, and Janet and Julie for the time today. I love this, building culture to position our institutions for success, to really position our students to have successful careers and a life. So thank you for driving that mission and supporting colleges throughout the country in achieving just that. This is our last Workforce Insights is what we call them. You see it on Sam's screen, our webinar series with Workforce Connect going into the summer. We're going to take a 2-month pause and hopefully come back in August. Would love to see more people attend, and so invite your friends as we learn from other college leaders. And if you have an idea for us, or would like to partake as a panelist, let me know, let Sam know. We'd be happy to talk to you. And Janet and Julie, for folks that want to get in touch with you, I imagine the best place to vector them is to the studereducation.com website. Is that true?
Absolutely. Yes. And hopefully easy to find us on that website. And feel free to email or if you find phone number, text at any time, be glad to connect with any of you.
Thank you, Sam. studereducation.com. Y'all have a fantastic summer, and thank you again, Janet and Julie.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Marty.
Marty. Thanks, Sam.